I'm Priscilla Lisicic, and I'm a member of the Slavonian American Benevolent Society and a descendant of Croatian immigrants who came to America in the late 19th and early 20th century. We here at the Slav Hall feel it is very important to capture the histories of our members. We have interviewed 6 people who are going to tell you their stories of their families' travels to America, their lives in Old Town, and their memories of their Croatian heritage.
My
dad came here in 1901. He was born in 1880. And my mother came here in 1922. He came through Australia and then Canada and to Tacoma. He came to the fishing village, Tacoma, which a lot of other fishing villages all the way up and down the coast. And he lived in a boarding house right down there on 32nd Street, Randich's boarding house. They all lived there and they fished in the summertime and the fall.
Both my parents were born in Croatia, a little village, which over there they call Selo. The name of it was Ježevica. My dad was a bit older than my mother. He came here in 1906. I think he was 16 or something like that. And my mother was born in 1906. And he came through Ellis Island. He had borrowed money from one of his brothers. He comes from a family of 5. And he came through Ellis Island and landed. From what I understand, he hopped a freight and he ended up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My father would keep in touch with everybody at home, and he found out that there were many people out here in Tacoma, Washington, so he left Pittsburgh and came out here to Tacoma.
My father...
What was his name?
George Vlahovic. A man named Frank Novak brought him, former Yugoslavia.
So your father came from which island?
From Brač, the island, and then as he made a few dollars fishing, he went back to get my mother. He was a mild man, my father, and my mother she liked going down the Slavonian Hall and bringing pastries. She was a great cook also in pastries.
My dad left Croatia in 1912. The story is in our family that he was supposed to come over on the Titanic, but his papers weren't in order. So we don't know if that's a story, but it's a nice story. He came later. He was from the village of Putniković, which is on the Pelješac Peninsula, which is like across from Korčula and north of Dubrovnik. And he came and worked in various places and looked up people from Croatia that he knew in California and Montana. He worked in Montana at the gold mines for some years. My mother's parents were both Croatian, so she was born in this country but spoke Croatian very fluently because my grandmother and grandfather didn't speak much English.
And my dad, he didn't like to go fishing. My mother was trying to tell him, why don't you go down on Pacific Avenue, and there's a restaurant there. It's called the Oyster House. He said, I don't know how to cook. Well, he said, watch them. And he kept going every day. He would go down there and look through the glass window how they were doing their cooking. And finally he learned how to do it. And then my mother, she worked at night, and my dad, he worked in the daytime.
My father came here in 1907 from the island of Šolta, which is in Croatia. My father's name was Visko Lisicic. I'm sure he must have come to Ellis Island, and then from there, by train, came to Old Town. I think he could have been in his teenage years when he came. we did fishing. That was the only thing. And then he had a boat built and named the boat the Shota, like the island he came from. My mother came in 1913, and she was always 10 years older than the year. Like if she came in 1913, she would have been 23. She came from the island of Hvar, which is spelled Hvar, and that's in the same area in Croatia. Stari Grad. And Stari Grad is a Croatian name, but it means old town.
Old Town was quite a few Croatians. People came from different islands, like the island of Vis, and at different gatherings, so they all got together. They come to our house, all the people that come there at certain days, holidays, and then we went to other people's houses. Remember, as little kids, we walked all over. We never had a car, but we all lived around Old Town here. They had the grocery stores, they had the meat market, they had Blanco's, they had a barber shop, they had a Japanese laundry, they had a drugstore, and they had a bowling alley underneath where the Spar is, well, underneath where the coffee shop is now. They had a bakery there, they had a convection store where they had ice cream.
My father always took us on the weekend, on Sunday. Of course, we had to go to church and Sunday school. At that time, you had 3 meals a day. Then later, on Sundays, you only cooked 2 meals a day because that was too much. But we would have lunch, and then we'd take the streetcar downtown to the Pantages, and my dad would take us to the theater. And then as soon as the stage part of it was over, he would leave and go down and play cards with the fellas and then come back and get us to come home. But he did take us, to the show on Sundays.
Everybody in Old Town then had a big, huge garden. My grandmother had a huge garden. She had raspberries and loganberries and strawberries.
And it was during the war years, and we had chickens. So we had chickens, and you had fresh eggs, and you had fresh garden. We ate organic before anybody knew anything was organic. And what's left over, I mean, what you didn't use fresh, you canned it.
We ate the same food list, like all garden food, everything was in the garden. We never bought any vegetables. And Old Town during the grape season smelled like a wine factory here because they're all made wine.
My Uncle Pete and my dad would crush them. They'd have cleaned fishing boots on, and they'd crush them in big wash tubs or something. And so we had wine, and we always drank the wine with water mixed in with it so it wouldn't be as strong at our meals. Mm-hmm. It was not the best wine in the world, but it was wine that everybody made. It was Zinfandel grapes.
When it snowed here, nobody could get out of Old Town. We all had sleds, and we take us over a half an hour to pull the sled up the top of 30th Street Hill, and then we come down, and we end up just about to Star Street because there was no traffic, and then do the same thing again, and then we sometimes go up Carr Street Hill and end up in the railroad tracks coming down there. When I grew up a little bit more, then I started fishing young. I believe I was 17. The first boat I was out with was the Star of Heaven, was the name of the boat. And my dad was fishing on it, so I was one of the crew members. No, we went to San Juan Islands. That's where the fishing was.
And you fished for salmon or other
Salmon,
things?
yes, salmon.
First on a fishing boat, I was probably 8 or 9. My father, of course, he had a fishing boat. I fished with Dan Lakita out of Seattle dragging off of the ocean, you know. He was a tough son of a gun. You didn't stay with him long if you wanted to make, you made money, you know, and that's the question of when you're fishing. And I fished with Jerkovich's 1 or 2 years, one of them. Made more money with him in 3 months than I made in probably 10 years myself, you know what I mean?
So, and where did you fish with him? Where did you guys go?
Puget Sound and Alaska. We'd go up north, come down here and get some sockeyes, you know. But they were good fishermen. I was just looking at them off most of the time, you know.
They had the Three Kings dance, which was one of the biggest dances they had here, and it was held right here upstairs here, but there was no food or no alcohol at that time. The hall down right underneath here, they would have beer, and then the men folks were down there, and the women were all up here. And they had church benches, which we still have a couple down here, that were lined up all the way the length of the hall on both sides, where the women would sit there and watch their daughters dance, and who they were dancing with. Word got around, they call that the censor board.
When a young lady was getting married, they would have a shower. The ladies that would put it on would be close friends of your mother or father, you know, the family. And they would call everybody to come. There was always plenty of food. And then the presentation of the gifts. Then you would have one lady who was a spokesman, and you'd have maybe one of the little family members would always bring the gifts and put it on the table for the bride to open. When it came, after you opened the gift, and then you had to find out who was from, who gave you the gift. The presenter of the gifts would read the names of all the people that had contributed to that gift and became very quiet. So you made sure that your name was read. And don't ever forget anybody.
And they would read it like Mrs. Jerry Byach Woods.
Right.
Yeah.
Or Mrs. John Robert at that time, if that, you know, if that was the name. But it would be, you know, very formal. And very quiet, so we leaned forward to listen.
They would have the Halloween parties, and we'd all dressed up in costumes. I picked out to be a gypsy, and I even had a plastic bowl, and we put some little things in it, and I used to hold that plastic bowl, and so then I would ask each one, you want me to read your fortune? And they said, yes, I'd like to hear. So I looked in the plastic bowl, and I said, you know what? Oh, I see here where you're going on a long, long trip. Oh, right. Well, what kind of a trip? They asked me. Well, it's just a long trip, and you're going to enjoy it.
So do you think it's important for us to understand our heritage and how we're all connected with our Croatian heritage?
Very important.
And why,
Yes.
why do you think that's important?
Oh, you have to have roots. You have to know where you came from. You know, it's just that simple. No matter what nationality, when you grow up with people that are like you, you feel safe and comfortable. Families know each other.
It was just like you belonged to something, you know, and it was important to us.
One of the sisters at Holy Names where the three girls went. Sister Rosemary, always used to tell the three girls, Meg and Kathleen and Judy, that she was 100% Croatian and they were only 50% Croatian. So I see her at St. Joseph Church in Seattle too, and she's, I go up to her and say, I'm 100% Croatian. So that's been kind of a funny tie-in that, makes me realize how important our heritage is and how I want to stay connected.
Less and less Croatian people, the younger generation, they're not interested in what the older generation was interested in. And there's less and less fishermen. In fact, there's practically none down here now, today, like there was before.
Yeah.
So it just, as time goes by, that's the way it goes.
My husband and all of the Croatian in Old Town and Gig Harbor, which is where he was from. And so it just was a happy memories. And when you see the change that's taken place in Gig Harbor with all the influx of new people, new building, it has changed so much. But it was a wonderful, warm, friendly place.
When you think about being a Croatian, what words come to mind? Is there any phrases that come to mind for you?
Stovo, what's this? Basically, I think it's just the food and the wine. Actually, I was talking to a lot of the seniors here in Croatia, or Old Town, and the lodge was like and stuff like that. So it was just very informative, very educational. I talked to John Petrinovich. He's a wealth of information, knows everything.
I don't know if it's a current word or an old word, but it's just being proud of being a Casualine. My grandpa would say, "No, we're Casualine," so and that means something. So it was like an inner pride, just say, "Hey, stop touching that." It was an inner pride. It was something to be proud of that's inside. It's not really worn on the outside, but it's more on the inside. So.